Hello, this is the Every Man Can podcast based on mental strength, how we can use it in our everyday lives, interviewing local people, using their experience, their wealth of experience through their personal journeys and their own professional journeys, how they use it for themselves, how they use it for other people, and hopefully you can take something from it. We hope you enjoy. Are we all right now after my blooper?
You're all right. Yeah, that was a good one.
Welcome to another episode of the Every Man Can podcast with me, Matt, Richie, and Matt. How are you both?
Good. I'm good. I was waiting for you to talk there, Rich. I'm brilliant. I'm just going to go into straight away. What a venue, which we'll talk about in 2 seconds. But
we are in a nice place today.
Isn't it? Exciting.
I'm good. A little bit of trepidation starting the first serious, all-encompassing Every Man Can day today.
Yeah.
Started with a lion for an extra hour.
And I thought that first day of doing it is lying. Then went for yoga.
I had like a Thai yoga massage as well.
What a start!
Yeah. That's my money gone. But yeah, no, I'm good. How about you?
I'm good, really good.
Yeah,
best I've been probably for 5 or 6 years, if I'm honest.
Wow.
Yeah,
Good
things seem to be
good to hear
on the up, but I don't take anything for granted. I just try and take each day, and then the next day is all right. I think. Well, this is weird.
You haven't got your radar on all the time looking for the net. Yeah.
Sometimes, but I'm not as bad.
I do wonder much how
hypervigilance.
I do wonder how many police are on hypervigilance lot anyway, just generally.
Yeah, it takes time to come down from it, but
keep an eye on that.
But yeah, other things. Yeah. But today we are at the Riverside Stadium, and thank you to Middlesbrough Football Club for hosting us today. We're in a box. They've set us all up with drinks, so yeah, it's really nice, really good place to be. And today we are interviewing Nick Gates. Nick's bio: former England U18 National Team player, Harvard University USA, Play Soccer USA, a coaching company working with 2 million children, Business of Football Executive in Middlesbrough 2002-2003. You've got 2 global charities, including Head Safe Football. The charity was inspired by former Middlesbrough defender, your father, Bill Gates, who died at the age of 79 as a result of CTE, which is chronic traumatic,
encephalopathy.
There you go. Nearly. And this was a result of heading a ball, despite not heading the ball since he was 29. Head Safe Football is dedicated to safeguarding the next generation of football players by reducing heading. You're taking proactive steps to protect their health and ensure that football remains a safe and enjoyable sport for all.
Yeah, and a Borough fan.
And a Borough fan. Well. And I know there's more to come. So the first thing we ask our guests, Nick, is what is mental strength to you?
I think mental strength for me has changed as I've got older. Now in my mid-50s, I certainly look at myself and my mental health and my mental strength a lot differently than I did when I was a teenager or in my 20s and 30s. Then I was invincible. There was nothing that I couldn't deal with. It all existed within me. I didn't share too much. I just felt that they were my problems and they were my solutions. And as I've got older, I've been very fortunate that even though I've travelled to more than 100 countries, my best friends are still the guys that I've known since I was 3 years old, that I grew up in the Northeast. And as our friendships have got deeper and deeper, I think we share more. And so particularly over the last 10 years, as I've dealt with care for my father, I think that my mental health and my mental strength changed, and I did rely on other people, and I did share more of what was going on in my life. But at the same time, I kept ownership of it, that they were my challenges and my problems, but I did take advice or support mainly from other people. So yeah, certainly changed. Now I'm in my mid-50s of what I thought mental health and mental strength should be or could be. And as we've changed as a society of what we feel comfortable talking about with regard to men's health, I think that's been a really positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing I've took from that is age. Mm-hmm. And we look at, like, I know we interviewed the lads from Tough to Talk, and they're dealing with suicide rates, etc., of young men. And I think as you do get older, you do generally start to take a bit more ownership and accept that. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about recently quite a bit. Is actually at the age of 46 I'm at now. Is that there was definitely a point when you said that about I wasn't young, I was invincible, and I feel like it's just everything's outward. You're not looking inward at all, and that's the way I always think of it. It's like you're just looking around and going, yeah, you're just interacting with the next thing, whatever comes your way, just moving on and trying to get as much done as you can. Trying to have a lot of fun and all that, and then suddenly something changes at some point where you've got to go more inward and you've got to take more responsibility for your own, your own behaviours, your own thoughts, and actually you start to realise you can only cope with so many things. Life starts to get more and more real as time goes on.
100%.
I struggle to describe it, but I think the way you described it there, it is definitely something. It certainly seems to be something. Someone else has mentioned this week about the age of 27 as well. Look at certain celebrities and there's the 27 club.
I watched Amy last night.
She was
about
27.
Amy Winehouse, 27.
She was 27. So another one, and a lot of the younger Brat Pack and so on. There's obviously something that must happen from there, and then moving into mid-30s towards middle age. A shift that happens. What do you think?
I think that I've also got to say that I've been incredibly fortunate. My dad was a professional footballer, and then he had a chain of sports shops. I travelled. I had the most amazing life. I got an England team. I got into a top university in America. And so it's very difficult sometimes to acknowledge that you do have some challenges sometimes, because in comparison to the vast majority of the world, my life's been fantastic up until the last 10 years.
I really want to talk, Nick, today about, I'd like to know a bit more about your journey up until your dad's illness. So when you were younger and the sports shops and your dad playing for Borough and playing with Nobby Styles and all that amazing things that and it's your dad, right? And your dad's your hero anyway. And then your dad is like a superhero then, isn't he? And so I'm really interested in that journey. And then I suppose I'm interested as well as when your dad was poorly, is that when you changed and you realised that you're not invincible as such?
Yeah, certainly when I realised I couldn't fix the problem for my dad. We were, unfortunately we knew immediately what the problem was when he started forgetting things. And I knew that I couldn't fix it. And that ended my invincibility of being able to solve every problem myself and being able to deal with it.
So leading up to that then, England, America, all of that?
Yeah, amazing parents, both my mum and my dad, incredibly close. My dad was my best friend, and created opportunities for me. Reflecting back, obviously I had to work very, very hard to be good enough to play for England and to have those opportunities to fulfill those ambitions. I chose at 16 not to sign professional contracts. I chose at 18 not to sign professional contracts. I think that's a reflection of my age, that there wasn't a lot of money in football at the time. And the thought of getting a degree from America and living in America was such a good chance for me to do something different. But everything went well. I worked very, very hard, but I had a great support system from my parents and close friends. So an encouragement to try different things and to be, if I didn't make it, they were still there. The love was equally as strong, whether I played for England or whether I played for my school team, Huntcliffe. Was very fortunate to have a lot of friends in a lot of places by the time I was 30 in many countries. And then I made a big decision. Again, everything was all healthy with my family, that I put a backpack on and traveled the world for 2 years. And when you see the world, your life changes again. I was always felt I was very, very fortunate, but then going into some of the places, seeing the war-torn countries, the slum areas and things like that, it reinforced how lucky I was. So yeah, everything absolutely fantastic. I don't know if people know my dad's story, but he sold his sports shops and moved to the Cayman Islands. So it's not the worst place in the world to go, is to go to the Cayman Islands when you want a break. Although I still think that Mask and Saltburn, when the sun's shining, is the best place in the world. But I remember sitting with my dad in his home in Florida, and over the course of 20 minutes, he asked me, what time are we going to go and play golf? And that was really the moment that my life changed. And from there, it's been a journey that I'll probably be the most proud of, of everything I've done in my life will be the last 10 years, but also the toughest thing that anyone can go through.
So your dad, professional footballer, talk about that, and then when he retired and the build up, the sports shops, and then the illness.
Yeah, so I used to joke with him that he was the first £50 a week footballer. They abolished the maximum wage the year he signed for Middlesbrough. He signed just turned 17. So he was the £50 wonder kid. And £50 a week in 1961 was incredible. I think the average salary was something about £1 a week or something like that. So, and he was married to my mum. If you read the book, we brought a book out about my dad called No Brainer. And the first sentence is they got married when she was 16 and he was 17. And so, immediately he took on those responsibilities. Had a fantastic career, but a very different career to today, that there was no freedom of contract. And so even if he was out of contract at Middlesbrough held his rights. And so he stayed at Middlesbrough for his full career from 61 to 74, played about 330 odd games, was a tough central defender. Off the field, the nicest man in the world. On the field, he was very, very tough. I grew up with a picture of him tackling George Best. One of the fun stories as a child was Middlesbrough played Manchester United, and after about 70 minutes at Old Trafford, the ball was cleared and 75,000 people watched the ball, and Brian Kidd punched my dad in the jaw and broke his jaw, and it was before substitutes. So he played on for a period of time until he couldn't actually keep his tongue in place, and then was taken off. But a year later, Borough played Manchester United again at Ayresome Park, and they brought out the teams walking out together, and my dad stood next to Brian Kidd and told all the rest of the Manchester United players if they were both on after 75 minutes, they'd both be coming off. Brian Kidd would be carried off, and my dad would be sent off. So he was, a tough player on the field, very well respected and liked by his teammates. And then worked very, very hard with his sport shops. And when he sold, he had about 15 sport shops in the north of England. Moved to Cayman Islands, had an amazing 20 years of travel, experiences, excitement, seeing the world. And then, as I say, sitting in our home in Florida, the day he asked what time we're playing golf 3 times, everything changed.
Can I just say as well, it's a bit different to your coaching when you were teaching kids how to dive properly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, how times have changed.
It does, and no VAR.
Yeah,
tough men, right? And
I mentioned earlier because I worked in a shared office with Don Berlero. They used to play for the Borough with your old man. I was looking at a photo outside there in the corridor. We're in the stadium, aren't we? And just brilliant. So just to know that his son as well, his son, and
yeah, a lot of the players from those photos we're still in touch with. Yeah. We did a film about my dad called The £1 Billion Game, and people like John Hickton and David Mills and Alex Smith were all part of talking about his story.
And Don always used to sit in the office, and we'd talk about the amount of money that players were getting paid now, and he'd missed out just by this, that he should really have a big band.
Yeah, but that's
it's
relevant now. I mean, you look at the players who first started in the Premier League, and
it is relevant now.
They weren't on 150 grand a week, and it's relevant to how things grow and how things. And I don't think you should ever live with regret. And I think if you live with regret around finances, then yeah, it's not good.
I don't think you regret it. I think you joke about it, but it was just because it was relative to everyone else as well, and obviously a great love for the game as well. I mean, you'd have to love it, wouldn't you?
So yeah, my dad used to. He used to take 2 buses to the home games. Yeah. So he'd go in from Ferry Hill to Stockton to Middlesbrough, and then walk to the ground. And so obviously incredibly different times, but I don't think he would have changed that part of it.
Well, I live near Albert Park, and I walk the dog regularly, and there's a statue of Brian Clough. Yeah. And it's positioned facing Ayresome Park, where I used to walk from Valley Road and Groville across, and it's all changed now, hasn't it? Look where we're sat today. I bet your dad would have loved to have played here. And then...
Yeah, even through his illness, I still brought him back here. One of the fun games, many fun memories of bringing him to games, but when we made the UEFA Cup final, I flew him in from America, and as we're walking around the stadium in Eindhoven, I was a couple of steps behind him, and I could hear people say, "That's Bill Gates. That's Bill Gates." So the joke is that he's the real Bill Gates. Not the Microsoft. But if you ask in Middlesbrough who Bill Gates is, he's the centre half for Middlesbrough.
So getting on to his illness, I won't attempt to pronounce it again, but...
The best is just to say CTE.
Okay, so CTE. And I was reading up a bit more about it again today. Heading the ball 100 times in training, and doing things like that. And I know when we spoke, I asked about the weight of the ball then compared to now, and you summed it up brilliantly, and I'd like you to go into that. But could you just explain how it comes about, what it's about, and the effects then it has?
Yeah, so unfortunately I know too much about CTE now because we tried everything to find a cure, to do everything we could to help him during this journey. But basically it's accepted that CTE is caused by repetitive head impacts and the number of impacts you have over your life. So you could get it, in sport. Rugby is obviously a major player in CTE, and there's
boxing, martial arts.
Boxing,
yeah.
so yeah. So those sorts of things. In football, it was talked about because a lot of the older players, if you get CTE, one of the parts of CTE can be dementia. And so what it actually gets lumped into is so many old players have died from and said they've had dementia. So of the World Cup 1966 team, nearly 60% of that team have died with some form of brain injury, brain disease. The problem is you don't know you have CTE unless you have your brain examined after you die. And so we've done the autopsy with my dad. That was one of the things that he asked that he wanted to be done. And so it was clear that he did have CTE. So, the journey is, we were kind of, because it's not talked about, or it wasn't known as well 10 years ago, we were kind of left on our own to try and find out what it was. But again, very fortunate that we had contacts all around the world, so we could take him into clinics in Canada and in Boston and Harley Street in London to try and work it out. All that they could say, it wasn't certain things, which led us to know it was CTE.
Okay.
And, again, the science is saying the more times you have contact with your head in anything, the more damage you do. The myth that you talked about with the ball, everyone thinks that the old ball weighed more, but there's been rules in football for 100 years that it has to weigh a certain amount in order to play a game. And so the next thing people throw at us is that, the other ball got wet, so it was heavier. Well, then the physics comes into it that the World Cup ball that was played in Qatar is the fastest moving ball in history, and it weighs the same. So the damage today is greater than it was when my dad played in the 60s and 70s. So this is where he asked us to protect the future of the game by protecting the players. And so that's the campaign with Head Safe Football is to work with young players and just to talk about their brain. And it's something we never talk about neither with mental health or strength, or also with injuries and disease. So that's where it all come from.
Because I know now with coaching, I think it's up to under 14s. You're not allowed, or 13s, you're not allowed to head a ball in training.
Under 9 is when everything's banned, training and games.
But it's up to under...
And then there's guidelines following that of how much they ask you to...
Yeah, so if you're playing under 9s or 10s now and a kid headers a ball, it's a free kick to the team. So basically it's to prevent that, even though then coaches still have the keeper kicking it high in the air at under 9s, and they're trying to... It's probably become more dangerous because the studs are now up here trying to control the ball, but... It's really interesting that you say about the 1966 team and the fact that it's put down to a dementia. What's the difference then between the dementia side of it and this?
So CTE is a cluster of tau proteins on your brain. So basically when you head the ball, your brain ricochets front and back. The damage that can be done is the neurons tear a little bit, and tau protein that is a healthy thing in your brain, if it leaks out and starts to cluster, it causes problems with memory loss, depression, violence, a number of things. So dementia is one part of CTE. It's caused by the CTE. And now many people, as we get told, many people have dementia. This is different. This is CTE, and one part of CTE is dementia. And it's caused by the repetitive head impacts.
Got it. One part of CTE is dementia, not the other way around. That's quite important. Yeah. So this is something which is obviously, certainly from my perspective, the other podcasts I listen to and looking at media and the conversations, it's getting more attention, thankfully. There's a local charity, Jan, who heads up that charity, I think her name is about kind of neuro-awareness, basically, about brain trauma and the impact upon the number of, so you look at prisons, for example, and the average population of a prison, I think something like 80 or 85% of inmates have had a significant brain trauma in their life at some point. That might only be one severe brain trauma. We're talking here right now about repetitive heading of a ball in training. So 100 times you said, like perhaps in training sessions and so on?
So where we're seeing CTE is in the military. You know, people have been involved in war zones, bomb blasts, etc. Also, unfortunately, women who are suffering from domestic violence. And so a lot more we're seeing those sorts of areas because it's contact against your head. It's ricocheting of your brain inside your skull that's causing that. And with the young players, that obviously the difference is the brain hasn't formed as well. So there's no safe time ever to get contact on your head. It's just like being a heavyweight boxer. If you get punched by Tyson Fury, you're going down. And the same. So with the young players, it's great that the FA have brought in something to start the journey for young players. What we're hoping is with HeadSafe's education and with more education, people understand that. Where it comes for me on mental strength and mental health is watching my dad's brain disappear. And so we were on that journey to see how important the brain is on everything that we do.
Was that over like quite a long period of time then? They're not, yeah.
So we, the last 10 years have been the journey, and the last 7 years care. He died almost a year ago. So 11 months ago he died.
So that journey, you talk about, you asked a number of times about going to play golf. And was that the first time where you thought, this isn't quite right? And the deterioration from there on, could you just go through the symptoms of that and how, as a family and as an individual, you thought, right, I'm not invincible anymore. You're seeing your hero almost in that state, and what that was like?
Yeah, I saw the strongest man in my life change. Every few months there was a different change. Forgetfulness was the first thing, anxiety, obsession. Over COVID, we had, as I mentioned, we had a home in the Cayman Islands, and we took him back because it was safest. Cayman was closed down, so the COVID was very, very rare. And this was easily the worst part of my life, obviously other than his death. But something in his brain was telling him that he had to walk, he had to exercise. So he would wake up and he would have breakfast, and then we'd watch, and at 10 o'clock, some signal in his brain told him he had to exercise. And because he couldn't get back, I had to walk with him. And so I'd walk for half an hour, and it's 30 degrees. And then we'd be in for less than a minute, and I'd give him a drink, and he'd say, I think I'll go for a walk. And I'd say, but Dad, we've just been for one. He said, well, have I? And then a minute later, I think I'll just go. So we walked from 10 till 6 every day for 6 months, and you watched his body. In saying that, some of the humor, something in his brain was telling him that he was training for pre-season. Something in his brain was saying, are we going for who we're playing today? And so I'll smile with it because it was you're seeing me tear up now talking about it. But there was some joy in there because I could reach him. I could tell, well, who we're playing? Well, we're playing Manchester United. Who's playing for them? George Best. And so the brain was telling him certain things, but it had gone from reality from there, but there was still the love. And so I wrote an article from one of the websites. It's the long walk to nowhere, and you would just walk and walk and walk and walk. So that was, I think, the worst part of the journey, and that was the acceptance that there was absolutely nothing that could be done. And for me, on the mental strength part, I was on an island, and although I've been there a number of times, I was as far away. COVID was going on as well, and I was as far away from my support network. And so, luckily, great relationship with my mum, and we supported each other, through those, and supported my dad.
Wow, good time to take a quick break. Just a quick break from the pod, and an opportunity for us to thank our partners, Everyone Active. Everyone Active have numerous gyms and facilities across the Tees Valley area. Sign up with them today, get your memberships. Physical exercise, as we all know, has a massive positive impact on our mental health also. Back to the pod. Welcome back, Nick. Powerful stuff. I want to ask you, and I know we've had a quick chat in the break, but around that 10 years of that support for your dad, and I mentioned, I know it's your dad and you love him and you do anything, but it's tedious walking out every day and trying to keep conversation and trying to, for yourself as well, to understand what was going on. And how did you and your mum get through that?
I think there were a couple of things. I think my mum, incredible mental strength. She's, well, we'll laugh and explain her age. She is 79 now. And her toughness of just being in front of everything. We kept getting as much information as we could. We were very realistic on everything. So we made decisions before decisions needed to be made. So we were very clinical in that sense of knowing that his life wasn't going to get any better. We found an incredible care home in Middleton. We were able to do our full-time care for as long as we could. We did everything that we could to make his life as full as possible. Up until the last couple of years, I would take him traveling still with me. And he would come around the world and he still put his Middlesbrough shirt on and still went on the field. And so for as long as possible, we created as normal a life as we could. From our side of things, it was an acceptance that it wasn't going to get any better. There was incredible challenges that the study from a doctor called Willie Stewart shows that footballers are 4 times more likely to get neurodegenerative disease. The problem on that is they're 50% less likely to get anything from the neck down. And so my dad was incredibly fit. And so we were watching this journey thinking, we have no idea where it ends, and we wanted it to end in a dignified way for him. And for us, for myself and my mum, and an incredible person, we just put him first as much as we could. And you become as strong as you possibly can facing outwards, and when you close your door, you have your cries. And my joke, and my friends know this now, that I don't think I cried for 50 years of my life. I didn't get in the team or I lost a game, or none of those things were important. But the last few years with my dad, it was very difficult not to cry. And I don't know whether that's a strength or a weakness. I just think it's the acceptance of getting older, of saying, I'm acknowledging that this is what I need to do.
Well, it certainly wasn't the thing that was done, was it? Like, wasn't it perhaps even a generational thing as well? But you talk about whether or not asking the question whether that's strength. Of course it is. I mean, I think you're actually saying it yourself, aren't you? To get through it, you've got to get this emotion out. You're struggling with like watching someone who you revere and love very much slowly disappearing before your eyes. It's tough.
And it was also a catch-22 situation that we don't talk about brain health as much as we talked about, everyone knew my dad had a new knee, but for the longest time we protected the fact that his brain wasn't working in the same way. So I would take him to games, but sit very close with him and protect him that way. So you constantly, to ask what it was like for the last 10 years, you never switch off. We didn't know during the night whether he'd wake up and come down and ask where he was going and things like that. So it's constant high alert, which is incredibly wearing. We talk about it, the families who've had players suffering from CTE, it's almost like post-traumatic stress at the end of it. It's that sort of thing. And, if we're talking about personal stories, I'm not quite certain where I am at the moment, because we've lived his legacy since his death. So he's part of my day every day. And so, I'm going to eventually have to deal with that. I'm very, very fortunate, and I'll shout out to my best friends that they've just been so wonderful with me of understanding when if they needed to turn up, they just turned up. So that was very, very strong for me.
So your dad passes, and now you're saying you're living it every day, which is a strength, because you're getting strength from that as well, even with him not being here. What else are you doing with yourself to try and cope day to day, week to week, and how are you supporting your mum and others through this?
Yeah, we had a moment a couple of months ago when my dad is buried in a woodland burial area, and things were coming to a life around him. And so Mum and I sat down and said, okay, it's time for us to live again. And so I think we've prioritized the journey that we've been through, and we're trying to make certain that she does things that give her meaning and joy. And so, she's traveled a little bit in the year. She's certainly been amazing. If you ever want to talk about Head Safe Football, she's on TalkSport, BBC, Sky Sports, etc., etc. So never ending with the work. And that, I think it gives her some purpose, some meaning. And so I think that helps her mentally to be involved in it. For me, I think that I accepted at the end of last year that it was going to be a really busy year as we were the leaders for protecting the future of the game and protecting the future players at all ages. And so my break, and it is a break, is towards the end of the year. I'm traveling to launch Head Safe in Australia and then taking some time to absolutely disappear onto a desert island in Indonesia and just sit for a while and let it all work its way through. But that's always been my that's been my mental strength, is working very hard and then creating some space for me to let it all settle and to work out what I need from there.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, the tears and the crying there's a metaphor we use in mental health training that I called mental health first aid that I deliver, and the metaphor is like a bucket, and it's like every bit of stress that goes into that bucket fills it up, and you either have a tap on the side, which could be you take a little bit of time out, 5 minutes a day, or in between while your wife takes over for a little bit, just get some calm. Just do whatever you need to do, a coffee, sit, relax, listen to some music, whatever it could be. But in fact, if you don't get that at all, any respite at all, whilst you're in that care situation, then that overspill is literally what you're going to see. And I always think that's a great metaphor, because it is just the tears start to leak out. It's the way the body would deal with it. And when you said it was all about kind of always being switched on, that's that parasympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, or maybe feeling anxious a lot as well, I would imagine. And at some point when that comes to a head, it's a case of, you have to realise yourself, I can switch off. I will allow myself and give myself permission to have that time now. But that takes time. Matt knows about this. I know about this. Having both experienced and being diagnosed with trauma in our life, is that we know what it's like to remain on high alert for quite some time, months or years. And that's really what Matt's saying. When he said at the very start of the pod, how is he doing? So I think we can relate, a little bit to what you're saying specifically.
It doesn't matter what the trauma is and what the upsetting thing is, and mine's different to yours is different to Nick's, and it's when I say around hypervigilance, it doesn't just come from my previous job. I mean, that's always going to be there, because
for sure,
that's why I wanted to join the police anyway, because I had that anyway. But my hypervigilance, I'm so wary of people, I'm so wary of trust, I'm so wary of sitting in rooms with my backs to walls. I don't like anything like that. But I think what's really powerful, Nick, is self-awareness is something that I give myself credit for, and I'm really, really aware of when I need to take a break. And I think the fact that you've got that in your sights now, you get through this busy period and you're having that break, I think that's a really good thing to do. And I think we all deal with stuff in different ways. And I know when I was on the sick for nearly 18 months, it was like a purpose. What's the purpose? And you talk about walking. My dog saved my life, really. But in the end, the dog was probably thinking, I know my border collie, but come on, I'll be doing another 10 miles, because I just walked, and I walked my way through it.
I think that's a key, is to find the things that allow you to move on. The analogy was take a big stride forward, and I said, but I can't take the big stride, but maybe I'll take lots of little strides very quickly. And that seemed to be okay, the acceptance of that he has died now, the acceptance that we couldn't change it, the acceptance, the frustration now of working to change football a little bit, to reduce heading in training, which has to make the generation when they're 35 and 40 safer. But also a big learning for me is that, I can only control the controllables that I can do, the things that I can't deal, that just simply, there's nothing that I can do that is going to change things tomorrow. Yeah. And then from my personal side of things, reimagining what are the things that give me joy. Because as you guys know, the last 10 years, there wasn't a lot of joy. There was moments where I could smile and laugh and things like that, but you knew that tomorrow was going to be a different day. And that's our challenge now with the football and the reducing heading, is we don't want other families to go through it, because it tests everything. And we use the phrase, we're not broken, but we're breaking to as far as we can break.
Yeah.
And and find the things that makes them.
You're not asking anything unreasonable. I mean, it's not. You specifically said they're heading in training. Obviously, you've mentioned you're a Borough fan. Obviously, massively into the game, clearly, and you must watch football through a different set of eyes, through a different filter now.
Yeah, and there's also the common sense stuff that if you were working in a school, for instance, if a child got hit in the head 25 times by a teacher, there would be something would step in and make the change. But because it's football, they're getting hit 25 times with the ball during the week, and it's the same impact. And so it's just common sense stuff that is protecting. And again, there's a lot of the former players are saying they would still play football. I think that the big challenge is that if it does go wrong, it doesn't really concern them then. It's their family, it's their wives, it's their sons, their daughters, etc., who have to deal with it. And I think they have a responsibility now as players to say, look, we can still be professional footballers or play every non-league football till we're 50, but let's just reduce the heading part, because the mental part of caring is one of the hardest things you can ever do. I don't know how the nurses and the doctors and things like that, we were very fortunate to have the greatest care people from the home in Middleton. And every day they turned up and gave my dad love and care and everything like that for the last year. He was with us until then. So
I was going to ask you one piece of advice you would give people listening who might listen and eventually hopefully not go through this, or they're going through similar things at the minute. And I suppose with a brain injury, for the family, it's getting over the frustration of what is it? I can't help. Like you say, physically, if you broke your leg, heart attack, you can help. But with that, would you say that's the one thing from a mental strength point of view is getting through the frustration of not being able to help?
So we were very logical with it. We got a lot of advice from experts. But when my dad would go a few months and kind of stay the same for a few months, your life changes and you're just used to that, and that's fine. But then he'd wake up the next day and it was worse. And that's one of the hardest parts looking back, was to say, okay, I can deal with that, that's fine. But then it got worse. And then a few months later it got worse. And so you always felt mentally you were getting drained more and more and more as the journey went on. And for me, it'll be the greatest thing I've ever done in my life was to be, for the last 7 to 10 years, was being a support for my mum and my dad. And I will be thanking the people in the care home, my best friends, all the people that were supporting of me and allowing me to go through that journey. But as invincible as I was as a 20, 30, 40-year-old and feared nothing and what have you, couldn't have made it through the last 7 years without sharing. And now I can tell the story, proudly tell the story of what the journey is, and proudly talk about my dad.
I noticed you mentioned several times, which is really positive, the support from your friends and family. So support from friends. One of the things we often talk about with men is either that they don't always have the words for emotions or the words for support, don't reach out when they need that support. Were you the type of man who did reach out, or we just have people around you who noticed? And obviously it was very obvious what was going on. It wasn't as hidden as you might see as an internal struggle that's purely an internal struggle. But what was the nature of that for you?
I think even with me, because there was a stigma about a brain injury as opposed to a knee injury and what have you, we did keep it quiet for a long time, even with my best friends. But once I chose to share with them, incredible support from all of them of being there or taking me away for an afternoon to a walk or a game of golf or a borough game or something like that. Perhaps looking back, and it's easy to say looking back in hindsight, perhaps it would have been easier to talk about it sooner, but at the same time I was protecting my dad's privacy of not wanting to use that as to tell people, because brain health, brain strength, brain disease, it's still a stigma. We know so little about it in comparison to what we know about knees and hearts and eyes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, I was incredibly fortunate and grateful that they gave me the space to talk about it in my time. You know, that they didn't force any. If I'd say a couple of things and then I didn't want to talk anymore, they were very, very caring of taking that step back. So I do think for everybody who is listening, use the opportunity to share what you feel comfortable sharing, and respect the fact that it's still your responsibility. You still own it, and you're not giving it away and waiting for someone to solve it for you. But you've given it to someone else, and they might just give you a pat on the shoulder or a hug or something like that.
Great words, Nick. We're starting to wrap up, unfortunately. What's the future look like then for Head Safe and them and your other charities? What does all of that look like moving forward?
Yeah, I think the demand for what we're doing is growing. We've got some great partnerships where clubs and counties and professional teams have reached out for us just to talk about it. But it's not a personal story that we're doing from Head Safe. It's all based on science. It's all, the latest research is showing for young people that heading the ball is not helpful to cognitive skills the next day. We think it's leading to problems with emotions and mental health. It's logical. If you're banging your head a number of times and it accumulates over the course of the week, young people now are going to be affected from it from there. So unfortunately, the demand for Head Safe football is greater than the supply, as people want to know about, what we know about it. And as we've said, I hope at least 10 times on this, we're not trying to destroy football. We're not trying to take heading out the way football. We're just saying,
be careful. Be careful,
yeah. In training, you don't have to do it. And another myth, the same as with the ball, the myth now with the coaches is they say, well, we don't do any heading training. And then as we point out that, well, the kids now are training more often. And let's say they only do 2 or 3 or 4 headers a night in the various warm-ups or head tennis or tech ball or set pieces. A lot of them are playing 3, 4, 5 times a week in the various teams, school, etc. So when you multiply that, and they're starting at 5 years old now, which is, much younger than when I was playing football. There's now all these great 3G fields, so they're playing more. We've worked out that by the time they're 16, footballers will have headed the ball 15 or 16,000 times.
Yeah.
And so by not doing any heading in training, we're still having that number of impacts. Now imagine that number of impacts on your knee. Imagine that number of impacts on your
100%.
toe. And so, we're hopeful from that, and we're learning every day. We now have Head Safe programs running in 6 different countries, and again, it's great for my dad's legacy to be the person that says, let's protect the game. We don't want football to stop happening, but let's protect the mental health and the mental, the brain.
I think we've all got responsibility I don't coach anymore, but having done 10 years in grassroots sport, I think I'll just talk about from a football point of view. I talk to young coaches now about this, and if I had now an under-6, under-7s team now, what a fantastic opportunity to have a footballing team. So everyone tries to play the Pep way, on the floor, from the keeper, it's never in the air. But you've got a fantastic opportunity now to breed young kids now, which is only going to do better for the professional game and our national sides, is you've got a chance to play football. And really when they get to 11-a-side, your heading should be minimal anyway, because now with bands, you've got an opportunity. And I watch younger games now in grassroots, 5 and 7-a-side. The keeper gets it, and the keeper's kicking it long. And like I said earlier, the feet are in the air. Like, you've got an opportunity to play football. And I think I always look at adversity, and I think it's fantastic that we're learning, and I think there's reflection, and as time goes on, it'll become more and more. But we need to learn from that. So how do we adapt now as coaches to, right, this is going to happen, it's happening, how can we make our game better? And how can we make our young people better footballers? Because we all want our kids to be good footballers, but now we've got a real opportunity. The ball doesn't have to be in the air as much anymore. The pitches are better. Everything's there.
And we know that we're keeping them safer.
Yeah.
In every other part of life, we're keeping kids safer. There was certainly, I didn't wear a helmet when I rode a bike as a kid. Everything we're doing. And unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, we did a game in Cambridge where the first game of football was ever played on Parker's Piece. And we played the rules of 1863 and we moved it through. It was great fun to do that. But it was also the week that the first non-league footballer was diagnosed with CTE. And so this is not just, my dad played 350 games for Borough, obviously but it's happening at all levels of football. And we're seeing now as brains, more brains are getting donated. Younger players are showing the signs of CTE. In America, kids committing suicide, brains are getting, and they're seeing they played contact sports. And so the effect is, we were all talking about mental health and mental strength. It's much bigger than getting the CTE. It's how they're living on a daily basis. It's suicide rates are going up and things like that. And so I think sport has a really good opportunity to try and keep everyone safer and an opportunity to talk about it as well. And that's the last thing with Head Safe is that we've created an environment now where young players feel free to talk about it with their coaches and their parents and things like that. So our joke is that if the hamstring hurts, they tell everyone the hamstring hurts. If the brain hurts, they don't talk about it.
Are you able to sort of reel off a reasonable list of sort of short, medium, long-term effects of this, like kind of that you see from the research?
Yeah, and the research is quite consistent now throughout the world. The difficulty, as you know, is you don't see CTE until your brain is examined after death. We're working hard with research groups. Can it be diagnosed during life? But there's so many, that we work with in Boston with Anne McKee, in Glasgow with Willie Stewart, and we're finding out more and more. The same as we're finding out more and more about the brain on everything.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's the same thing when it comes to sport.
So you mentioned about mental health problems. Like that's obviously that's something can be quite short term, quite medium term. We talked a lot about the long term. Is there anything else particularly that we're starting to see links with?
Yeah, there's lots of tests now to say if children playing contact sports, how they're doing in schools, whether it's having an impact in their schools. And the logic to me is if you're banging your head a number of times, you can't do as well in school. There are things now in the government. We work with the government to try and get different policies in place now. Whilst it's not concussion that we talk about, there are better rules now in for concussion. So all of these things, as we understand what the brain does, we're able to make better changes. The resistance is greater than for knees and hamstrings and ankles in sport. It's much easier to get change for those things than it is for getting change for brain health.
Yeah, cognition.
Nick, another one where we could just go on and on, but it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for being so open and honest. And it's a fascinating conversation, which I'm sure we'll pick up again. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your time. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.